Okay, let's try that again. It's Sunday, September 29th, 2024. I bet you were worried there for a minute. You're watching Co-op for Two, and we are starting a new series here of Dear Holmes. Now, I can see we're off to a rough start. I've only been awake for an hour. We had a 6-hour stream last night, part 2 of Time Stories Revolution, the Hadel Project. We played that 2 nights in a row, 2 5-hour streams. Finished at about 5:30 a.m., 6 a.m. I got 6 hours of sleep. Here I am for our Sunday afternoon session. Tomorrow morning, I am off on a plane to Florida to help my mother recover from a flooded condo in Florida. Okay, so assuming you can hear me and we are broadcasting, hopefully I've got my wits about me. If you're tuning in to watch the design diary that I originally scheduled for today, I postponed that because I just wanted to have a fresh, focused mind for that. Those are the only videos, other than the reviews, that I really try to plan out stuff to say. And I just didn't feel like my heart was in it for today. So we'll reschedule that after I get back next week. It's put a little wrinkle in our normal plans for October. Normally we try to hit October and start playing spooky games from the first to the last day of the month. But that's okay. We jammed in some games at the end of September, and we will start playing our horror spooky games when I get back. Jonathan Warner has updated the thread on Board Game Geek listing the games up to play in October. If you haven't visited that thread, there's 2 threads that you should stop by and look at on Board Game Geek. For this channel, there's a general game queue thread, which is like 54 pages long, of all the games that I have available to play, many of which Patreon supporters have helped pay for. And then Jonathan Warner started a new thread for Halloween spooky games for 2024. And you can see there's a big list of them. We have some deluxe ones that we'll be playing right around Halloween, but we've got a whole bunch of games to play. Including, well, there is a new game behind me. You can see that I just got sent, that I just purchased used from one of the puzzle people on Facebook, Courtney. Another one from a different country. I forget what country that is, that Alexander Morrison case is from, but it looks exciting. So how is everyone doing here? The Dear Holmes case we're going to play today is the newest one from Dear Holmes. I've just got the final 4th letter, so we're caught up, so we guarantee we don't have to wait for it. And so we were playing an older case, now we're playing the brand new case. YouTube says 16 current viewers. Teresa, who's also in Florida, survived okay. Okay, anything else to talk about before we... Making a dog for a dog, says Marlene. I happen to know what that is a reference to. Marlene posted in the Discord a photo of a stuffed animal cat that she made for her cat. Now she's making a dog for a dog. That's pretty cute. Oh, this coffee is good. I'm drinking this Mad Goat Papua New Guinea. Mad Goat is the local company. You can order their coffee online. I recommend it. I love it. They make a Mexican Chiapas, which is really good, and a Papua New Guinea, which is really good. Boy, this is good though. Okay. Buddha Bell says, I'm doing comic fan art at the moment. I wish you guys would share more of your hobbies and projects. I'd love to see them. Best place would be on the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. There's a link on the YouTube page, but also in the Discord. Or just put the links in the YouTube chat. I'm happy to have you guys promote your stuff. Rob says, the Alexander Morrison case behind me is from Portugal. Really? Portugal? Okay. Let's see what we got here. So the reason you're seeing that thing on the side of the screen is because when we played Time Stories, we used my green screen, which normally I have a little green cube, a little square here when we want to look, focus in on a card. So I have to remember to turn those off. And I did write a new OBS plugin the other day, a short one that lets me play sounds. So maybe we'll start having some sound effects in future streams. I noticed some of the YouTube streamers have all these complicated YouTube overlays, and a couple of them have some cool animations that run across the bottom of the screen or something. And but if someone wants to help me put together a soundboard of sound effects that I can trigger, let me know. We could even set it up so the audience could trigger them. That's not a bad idea. I'll worry about that later. All right, so let's see. Have I got all my stuff? Yes, okay. You guys are probably going to get sick. You're already surely sick of me talking about it, but this is the arrangement we've agreed to make on this channel, that you are going to put up with me regularly reminding people that they can support this channel on Patreon and thanking the Patreon supporters. You're going to put up with that, and we're all going to agree that no one has to feel bad for not financially supporting this channel. But we're also going to agree not to be angry at me talking about it, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it because I love the idea of the audience funding this channel rather than putting ads. So I can turn all the ads on this channel off, and I'm not going to do any paid previews. I don't have to take any money from any publishers. I can avoid review copies. We can keep ourselves unbiased here. And we can promote the idea that YouTube channels can be sponsored by viewers. That is the healthy relationship. That's the healthy relationship we have here. And we're all going to be happy about it. Joj says, sound can be cool. Otherwise, I like the down-to-earth, simple setup of your stream. I agree. These crazy, fancy effects and stuff seem distracting. We try to keep it functional here. But an occasional sound effect wouldn't be the worst thing. All right. Let's get started here. All right, we've got a new case and a new letter from John Watson, 15 August, 1894. Dear Detective, I find myself writing to you in a time of need. The summer finds both Holmes and I in rude health, and my medical practice is almost bereft of patients due to the fine weather. Yet we both find ourselves distanced from each other and Baker Street. Holmes was invited to the Earl of Kinloch's estate in Scotland, where the two are enjoying the grouse shooting season that began on the 12th of this month. The glorious 12th, as they say. For my part, I'm reaping the benefits of scarce patience by attending a medical conference in Brighton. This will require my absence from Baker Street for almost a week, so whilst I have been able to make preliminary inquiries, I will be precluded from conducting a proper investigation. With this in mind, I trust that you might be able to apply your skills to this singularly grievous case. A letter was delivered to us yesterday by a government messenger, written in the familiar hand of Mycroft Holmes. Surprisingly, it was addressed to me instead of his brother, and it bore not one, but two red wax seals. I now realize the two seals were not a product of carelessness, but rather an indication of the delicacy of the contents. In summary, Mycroft is aware of Sherlock's absence and has requested my services in his brother's place. I was instructed to take an express from Waterloo Station to Guildford, where lodgings for me had already been reserved at the Bull's Head. The letter informed me that an advisor to the Prime Minister, Sir Charles Cavendish Short, has died unexpectedly, and that there is an internal aspect that may relate to his death. Questions are now being asked in government about his sudden demise, most notably, 1. Was Sir Charles's death due to natural causes, or was his life prematurely curtailed? If the latter, then by whom? And 2. Is there some foreign intrigue linked to his death? If you should find yourself able to assist me, and beyond this, able to develop a plausible explanation for these circumstances, I urge you to mail your conclusions to the address below. Our American associates will advise me by telegram, and I will proceed accordingly. You have our full confidence, and, as he is wont to do, Holmes will study the facts of the case and present his solution to you once he has returned to Baker Street. I envisage this will occur within 4 weeks. Until that time, please review the included information, which I recently gathered and sent to Holmes. I am most grateful for your kind attention and trust that you will indeed take up this peculiar puzzle. Yours most respectfully, John H. Watson. Okay, well, this sounds like a serious case. from Mycroft, meaning spycraft, international politics. An advisor to the Prime Minister, Sir Charles Cavendish, died unexpectedly. Okay. Okay, so that's him writing to us on 15 August. And here he is writing to Holmes. It's still Watson. Has he told us what's the next letter here? All right, well, here he is writing to Holmes. My dear Holmes, I hope you are well, and as you will see from the address, my hope for a quiet week away from my practice has been somewhat interrupted after a rather disturbing letter from Mycroft, which sent me in the direction of Guildford. This morning, before my departure, I hurried out to Schroeder and Ganji, the wonderful tobacco emporium, to make a small purchase that might be a challenge for you to identify upon your return. At the entrance, I was greeted first by the aroma of a multitude of tobaccos, and then by one of Mrs. Marissa Ganji, Mr. Schroeder's wife, I learned, who is in charge of the shop whilst he recovers from a minor illness. Mrs. Gajne, invited me into the shop, singing "Welcome, welcome," and promptly showed me to their vast glass-fronted display cabinet, which fills one complete side of the shop. Upon its surface were countless china bowls filled with, perhaps, an ounce or so of different tobaccos. As I moved from bowl to bowl, dipping my head towards each like some inquisitive heron, I marveled at how the pungency, color, and texture varied. I must confess I was entranced and determined to buy an ounce of 3 quite different tobaccos. As the shopkeeper weighed my selections, I asked her if she enjoyed working at such an establishment. See, normally I work at Royal Holloway as a lecturer. Who is this, us talking? No. As a lecturer, I'm dedicated to the sciences, especially zoology, and to ensuring others like me have a chance at proper learning, said the pale woman, adjusting her spectacles. I'm also responsible for the school's theatrical troupe, she chimed. So I've got plenty on my plate, though I don't mind helping when there's a need. The store is my husband's, really, but he insisted it should carry both of our names. Finishing her sentence, she passed the neatly wrapped parcel of tobacco to me and collected my payment. Thank you for choosing Schroeder's and Ganji, she wilted, and off I went. Upon my return to Baker Street, I quickly packed the Gladstone and then hurried down the stairs and out into Baker Street. Once at the curb, I stepped out into the street, held up my cane, and furiously flagged down an approaching hansom, with a cry of "Waterloo Station, as quick as you like, cabby," and a florin tossed up to the driver. I clambered inside and was soon off at a fearsome pace. It was as I traveled in the cab I briefly reflected on the content of the letter. I am to travel to Guildford, and for both privacy and, I believe, some element of secrecy, I am to examine the body of Sir Charles Cavendish Short at the Watts Cemetery Chapel. Her Majesty's government, it seems, requires me to confirm that his death was due to natural causes, and that his life was not prematurely curtailed. Sitting back, I considered this for a moment. Usually this would be undertaken by a local pathologist, or if not, then surely the government would be able to transfer the body to London for examination. I then reflected on the implied importance of this late gentleman to the government, and the mention of a rather disturbing international aspect to this matter that might then preclude the government from acting openly. I was, I admit, a little mystified by this consideration. The name of the deceased was not unknown to me, but it took me half a minute or so to recollect where I had heard it. I sat and muttered to myself, Short, I have him. I have seen his name mentioned in the Times, as as an advisor to the government upon affairs in Africa. My thoughts were interrupted by my arrival at Waterloo Station, where I purchased my first-class ticket. I made my way to platform 4, and once ensconced in my compartment and with my Gladstone carefully stowed away, I found it necessary to rest for a moment. After only a few minutes, I could hear the sounds of the guard's whistle close by, followed by a shrill response from the engine. Moments later, I was jolted in my seat as the carriages were pulled raggedly away from Waterloo. Settling back, I took from my pocket the buff-colored envelope and once more scanned its content. Sir Charles had taken a few days' leave and had secured a room at the Bull's Head, the inn in Guildford. This was apparently so that he could pursue his hobby of watercolor painting. As I read on, it became evident that whilst there, Sir Charles had ruffled a few feathers. Mycroft notes that the local constabulary took statements from the hotel staff and discovered there was some resentment to Sir Charles' presence due to his brusque manner. Notably, he seems to have fallen foul of some coarse fellow in the bar, a local rat-catcher who had accused him of spilling his drink. This was strongly denied by Sir Charles, and whilst no fisticuffs ensued, there was indeed some degree of unpleasantness which was not resolved. Later on another occasion, there was an excessively spirited discussion between Sir Charles and a local retired army officer at his dinner table. This was regarding the government's overseas policies, particularly in Africa. It was noted that the latter discussion occurred on the evening when Sir Charles fell ill with severe abdominal pains. These symptoms were followed within a few hours by coma and death. A discreet post-mortem was carried out yesterday at the Guildford mortuary, the results of which Mycroft says await me at the Watts Cemetery Chapel. A Dr. Weaver is to meet me there at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. What truly intrigued me, Holmes, was that Mycroft wrote that a Dutch fellow, also staying at the Bull's Head, has been questioned regarding the death, and that the Dutch government has been informed, but they are taking a very dim view of the affair. To my chagrin, your brother did not supply any further details in this matter. In his final words, however, he does mention that Sir Charles is a widower and that he has a daughter, Annie, now an adult, who appears to be estranged. Her whereabouts remain unknown, and so the authorities have been unable to inform her of the death. Okay, so we're getting a little more details of the circumstance of Sir Charles's death. He went to a local town to do his hobby, and he ruffled some feathers of a couple people that I guess are suspects, persons of interest. And then we've got typical spycraft stuff. They found someone else who was staying in this hotel that they're suspicious of, a Dutch person. Maybe he's got some history. There's some reason they're suspicious of him. Post-mortem results are coming soon, tomorrow morning. And we've got mention of an estranged daughter. I scanned the letter once more and noted that Mycroft mentioned, although briefly, that Sir Charles had been a close confidant of the Prime Minister for some time and was the draftsman of much of Britain's future plans for southern Africa. This included specifically our relations with the Boers, an issue upon which Sir Charles is known to have been particularly unyielding. Maybe someone in the channel can look up the history with the Boers in South Africa. It's obviously a real rich history. On reading this, my mind was racing with hypotheses, especially with regard to the mysterious Dutchman. But thinking of your methods, I stopped myself. I smiled as I imagined you saying, "Facts, Watson, facts. You will have to wait until the morning and your examination of Sir Charles before being able to move forward." Remember, Holmes does not like speculation. Go get the facts. Don't get yourself caught up in early theories and hypothesizing. Although that's what we do on this channel, we do not follow Holmes's strategy. In spite of the myriad what-if questions on my mind, I managed to sit back and watch as the last remnants of the houses that make up London fell away to reveal the leafy countryside of Surrey. The train sped onwards and seemed eager to consume the 30-odd miles to Guildford, thanks partly to the new railway line serving Leatherhead and the Epsom Downs, and before long Guildford station came into view. On leaving the station, I engaged a cab from the rank on the station view to convey me to the Bull's Head. It was a swift ride along the high street, and the cab finally slowed as it passed beneath a huge, ornate, double-sided clock protruding outwards over the high street on an iron beam. I was pleased when we came to rest beside an inn with a rather fine Tudor-like facade. This grand building, with its overhanging upper story, proudly proclaimed itself to be the Bull's Head, where, per its signage, one can find ample accommodations and a profusion of ales, beers, and spirits. On tossing the cabby a shilling, I stepped down with some degree of stiffness from my journey and made my way into the porch of the inn. I peered manfully through the stained glass of the door in the direction of the bar, and as I entered, I dropped my Gladstone with but a single thought: dinner. All tiredness seemed to fall from me with the prospect of nourishment. Behind the bar was a large blackboard lodged between shelves of spirits. This I regarded most closely, as upon it was chalked the menu of the day. My eye fell upon the game pie, a rare treat so early in the grouse season, which I did not hesitate to request. Thereafter I found a table and was soon enjoying a pint of Carter and Peer's best bitter, whilst waiting for my meal. I must declare that as I sat there, my thoughts turned once more toward the Dutchman. Mycroft states that a man has been questioned, presumably for some suspected involvement in the death of Sir Charles. Thus, it appears the man was nearby when they discovered the death. However, as Sir Charles was seriously ill for some hours prior to his death, why would a guilty man remain at the scene? To allay suspicion, perhaps? As I considered this, the landlord, John Pryor, appeared with a steaming tray containing my game pie, and on seeing my fare, I was for some moments able to elude these thoughts. I must admit that the game pie, served with wonderful rich gravy, was a delight. And when the landlord returned to ask me what I would like to follow, I engaged him in conversation. Tell me, I understand there was an unexpected death at the inn earlier in the week, I asked, with all the innocence I could muster. The landlord stopped with my tray in his hand. Yes, sir, I'm surprised you heard of that in London. It was a gentleman that was staying here. Had been out painting, I believe, and then fell ill and died within hours. Like a bolt from the blue, it was. Fine one day, then gone the next. The landlord then lowered his voice before continuing. He seemed a bit of a grumpy fellow. One of those city gents what thinks he's better than us folk. Little did he know I'm a man of the future. Paints are nice, pastels better, but why waste hours attempting to recreate scenery that a photograph will capture without mistake? Pryor then frowned, saying, he rubbed folk up the wrong way, he did. They questioned a Dutchman who had been with him, and then, bless me, they let him go. On saying this, the landlord turned slightly and pointed a stubby finger towards a middle-aged gentleman sitting some small distance away in the corner of the room. I nodded before looking over the landlord's shoulder to consider. Once more, the blackboard bearing the day's menu. As you are well aware of my penchant for steamed puddings, Holmes, it will be no surprise when I say, I think that I might have a little of the spotted dick and custard, if you please. The landlord grinned as he responded, That custard's my specialty. A shame you weren't here last month. lowered the price in honor of my birthday for the entire week of the 10th. As the landlord walked away, I took the opportunity to look past him and regard the gentleman that he had pointed out. The fellow appeared to be well dressed, although in clothes of an unfamiliar cut. He was somewhat portly, having a round face topped by unfashionably long gray hair swept back from his temples. He sat, drawing upon a clay pipe, with a solitary drink in front of him. I determined then and there to make his acquaintance and approached the Dutchman's table, where I drew from my waistcoat pocket one of my cards. This I proffered to the gentleman, saying, excuse the intrusion, sir. My name is Dr. John Watson. Might I join you briefly?" The Dutchman looked up with a puzzled expression and took my card. He looked at it for a moment, and then in excellent English and with a fine accent replied, "Why, yes, doctor." The man offered his hand, saying, "I am Jacob DeWitt, from Rotterdam." I sat down and continued by asking, "Tell me, Mr. DeWitt, what do you know of Sir Charles Short, the gentleman who died earlier this week?" Jacob DeWitt puffed out his cheeks before saying, "Doctor, I must say I know very little. I had met him twice on the banks of the River Wey. I had taken my oils and easels, and on meeting a fellow man of the arts, had sat together with him as we painted, although Sir Charles painted in watercolors." I nodded and waited for DeWitt to say more. "He painted exquisite flowers, and to do this he used the finest of brushes. Impressive, really." DeWitt paused, as though recalling his meeting. "Yes, to obtain the intricate detail, he had the most curious habit of drawing out the hairs of his brush with his lips." Okay, so wetting down the tips of the brush. That sounds like a little clue. Maybe he was poisoned. Someone put some poison on his brushes, and when he put it in his mouth to lick down the hairs, he got poisoned. Last page of our letter here. At this, I raised an eyebrow. DeWitt continued, "As we spoke, I discovered that we were indeed staying at the same inn. In fact, on the day of his death, we had taken tea together." DeWitt paused. Perhaps that is why I came under suspicion. You know, the police have retained my passport, and I have been told not to leave Guildford either. I believe I was only released from questioning after the intervention of the Dutch embassy." I pulled my chair closer to the table on hearing this, and then asked, "Are you here on business, Mr. DeWitt?" He nodded. "Why, yes, I am a representative of the Amersfoort Tobacco Company, one of the oldest in Holland. I have been coming to England for many years now to sell cigars and pipe tobacco." Upon hearing this, my eyes lit up, and I cried, "Splendid! You may then be of some assistance. I purchased 3 varieties of tobacco yesterday, and unfortunately did not think to label my purchase." Oh, he's going to test them with the tobacco. With these words, I delved into my jacket pocket and produced the 3 small parcels. These I carefully placed before DeWitt. I watched eagerly as he unwrapped each parcel, examining the contents of each one before holding it to his nose and then rubbing the tobacco between his fingers. After some contemplation, he beamed at me, saying, "You have made some interesting choices, Dr. Watson. The first is Latakia, a fire-cured tobacco used in Balkan blends. It has a smoky aroma and is probably from the island of Cyprus. The second is an American blend of Perique, originally from a state known as Louisiana. I think you will find that it is often combined with a more delicate, lighter leaf from Virginia." I nodded in appreciation and held out my hand in an invitation to proceed to the 3rd parcel. DeWitt once more ran a little of the tobacco through his fingers before he raised it to his nose and sniffed. "This is another interesting selection, Doctor. I believe it is a North American burley, air-dried, quite mild, but no, there is an addition, a little Kentucky, I think, to add some spice. I clapped my hands. Bravo, Mr. DeWitt! Although I might argue that the first one was sold to me as coming from a little further east, but still within the Ottoman Empire. DeWitt smiled and nodded in return. But still within the Ottoman Empire. DeWitt smiled and nodded in return. It was as I began to gather the packages together and stood up, saying, I think my friend Sherlock Holmes will find them all to be a good smoke. Stem Sam? The Dutchman's eyes widened, and then his expression hardened. Ah, I see what you are saying, Doctor, so that is why I was questioned. I nodded slowly. Yes, I believe it was, Mr. DeWitt. I learned a fair amount of what they are calling Afrikaans while serving in the army. I took a short breath before adding, I will do all I can to have your passport returned so that you might be on your way. With that, I gave a polite nod and strode back towards my table as I could see my dessert was about to be delivered. Know that I will ensure you receive the latest details after visiting the cemetery tomorrow and speaking with Weaver. Kindest regards, Watson. Okay, so he tests him to see if he's testing him to see, is this guy really a tobacco dealer or is that his cover story and he's a spy? And the guy obviously knows his tobacco. So I think Watson is convinced that he is a real tobacco dealer and not a spy. But now, what's this last part I don't quite get? So he says, bravo, you do them all. And then Watson says, I think my friend Sherlock Holmes will find them all to be a good smoke. And then he says in Afrikaans, stem saam. Now, what does stem saam mean? Yes, it is Afrikaans, but what does it mean? Now the Dutchman's eyes widened and his expression hardened, and he says, I see what you are saying, Doctor, so that is why I was questioned. Do you concur? The channel says. Rob says it means, do you concur? So she says, I think Sherlock Holmes will find them all a good smoke. Do you concur? And the Dutchman now says, I see what you're saying, so that is why I was questioned. Is he saying because Sherlock Holmes is involved is why he was questioned? What is he, or because he speaks Afrikaans, meaning he was in the war? And that's why, maybe that's it. I see, okay. And this is saying, I learned a fair amount in Afrikaans while stirring in the army. So it sounds like, is he saying because you know Afrikaans, so you have some connection with South Africa, that's why you were why he was questioned? Connection to South Africa. Okay, so we're in agreement. So when he says he says this in Afrikaans, and the Dutchman's like, aha, you know I speak Afrikaans, and that's why I'm a suspect, because of the connection to South Africa. Okay, catching up with the chat. The Boers. Let's see, the Boers were in South Africa as farmers, Dutch, German, and French. They were colonizers. Second Boer War, 1899-1902. Conflict between British Empire and the two Boer republics, South African Republic and the Orange Free State, over the empire's influence in South Africa. Melissa says a lot of conflict among the different countries trying to colonize along with the South African people. Debbie says the letters date 1894, so it's sometime before the war, though I guess things had been brewing for several years. Okay, so fight over control of South Africa by the colonizers. This is an interesting letter. Okay, so a couple of things jump out at me compared to some other Dear Holmes letters we've read. This one feels much more like an attempt at a literary piece. The writing and the atmosphere here is very well done. The ride in the train and on the cab, it's taking its time to paint us a picture, very well written. I really did feel like Watson was back in those times and we were traveling along with him. But very short on details for our case. It's quite often that in the first letter we get, there's tons of weird details about the death to think about. Here we have very little. This is much more a feeling of reading a proper story and less focus on mystery clues for us. We're just introduced to characters. One character that we think Watson is convinced is probably innocent because of his tobacco knowledge. Makes sense. And we did get one little clue from the Dutchman, which further leads us to believe he's innocent because he's revealing this information, which suggests it might be how he was poisoned. He had the most curious habit of drawing out the hairs of his brush with his lips as he's painting, and then painting like that. So that seems quite likely the method of murder. But other than that, there are no clues for us beyond that, it seems. All right, well, very well told. I am looking forward to reading more of the story just because it's so well told. I'm curious to hear how he was poisoned. Surely he was poisoned. But one thing that's a little odd here is I thought Watson was saying he wasn't going to be able to do this. I am reaping the benefits of scarce. I am attending a medical conference in Brighton. This will require my absence from Baker Street. So while I am doing preliminary inquiries, I'll be precluded from conducting a proper investigation. But then he's traveled here to do the investigation. Maybe it just means he's not going to be able to follow up on it. But he's clearly down there to investigate it. All right. A little bit of history, some nice storytelling. Looks like it's going to be an interesting case. Debbie says, I like it. It's an interesting setup. Only one obvious suspect so far, though. Well, we were told about a couple more people that he angered. The local rat catcher and someone who said he spilled a drink on him, but we haven't met those people or learned any of the details. Okay, well, that'll do it for today. A short 40-minute session. I'll be gone all next week, but we'll meet up again next weekend. Presumably, we'll have our second session of A Brush with Death this coming Sunday. Any further last-minute thoughts here? Joe J says, if it's poisoned by brush, it'd have to be someone who knows him well, right? Well, remember, he came to this place to paint. So presumably people have been watching him paint, I think it's going to turn out. So anyone casually observing him would probably observe him with this habit. So I'm not sure it has to be someone who knows him well, just someone who's observed him around painting around the town. but it's going to have to be someone with access to poisons and a small amount of poison to put on a brush, and presumably without much taste. It'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. All right. I'll see you guys next week. Hope everyone is doing well here. Feel free to share what you've been up to on the Board Game Geek Guild or on the Discord. I'll probably be connected to the Discord during the course of this week. Happy to chat about whatever. If you want to help us plan the rest of the games we play in October, stop by that Board Game Geek Guild thread that Jonathan Warner wrote. It's actually, this is a chance where you'll have a real chance to influence what games we play, because we will be playing through these Halloween scary games, but some of them are multi-session and we're going to have to figure out what to play when. So if there's a particular game on that thread that you're interested in joining for, you can help us figure out a schedule for it that works for you. I'll see you next time.